This will be the final lesson in the three-part series on how best to study. So what we've learned in the past two lessons is that increases in storage strength require multiple consolidation events, which must happen over time with episodes of sleep intermixed. Spaced study sessions lower retrieval strength but set up repeated opportunities for consolidation. So you'll notice then in the bottom graph, this is sort of the goal. We want to increase the storage strength for the information that we're trying to learn. We want to have access to it over the long term. And we get this kind of bumping up of storage strength as a result of our study practices. And we want to be smart about our study practices. We do not want to cram. We want to have multiple study sessions that are spaced out in time. Each time we space out a study session, we are creating a difficulty. We're lowering retrieval strength here, here, and here. But that ends up being good for long-term retention because when we study with low retrieval strength, we have the best opportunity to increase storage strength. Notice that high storage strength here means slow forgetting. The slope is more gradual than when we started in the beginning. And with high storage strength, even the delay caused by sleep will not drastically affect retrieval strength. So you see, notice then that the floor here of retrieval strength has been changing. So initially, there was a big drop in retrieval strength after the first night's sleep. But after the second night's sleep, we have better retrieval. After the third night's sleep, etc., better retrieval. So if we space out our study sessions wisely, we're going to get to the point where we're boosting storage strength so much that even the delay caused by sleep does not diminish retrieval strength. Now, let's move to our final misconception that students sometimes have. Students sometimes think that tests only measure their ability to retrieve information that is already stored. Now, students do often use self-testing, but they may just think that it's a measure of what they know. And the reality is that tests actually help students learn the information in the first place. Retrieving information triggers reconsolidation processes to strengthen memory traces. Retrieving information increases storage strength. So it's not just telling you what you know, it's actually strengthening the memory traces for that information that you're studying. Now here we see a brain. We've got our text information has been strengthened because of system consolidation, and then the next study session after a delay we have some question about that information. That's our retrieval cue, and we're going to be forced to try to access our stored memory for that information. Well, that's good study practices. It means now that information that we call up can be routed through the hippocampus again, and we can do another round of consolidation, thus strengthening our cortical memory trace for the information. So actively retrieving memory for the text information triggers another round of consolidation. The brain seems to operate on the following principle. Information that it repeatedly encounters must be important, so store it well. However, the benefits of this type of study practice only occur when the memory retrieval system is engaged. We actually have to be trying to retrieve information from our long-term memory system. Evidently, simply rereading the text information does not produce the same gain in memory consolidation. The memory retrieval systems are not engaged if we're just rereading stuff. So there's less effective consolidation when we just reread our notes than if we were sort of quizzing ourselves, trying to remember what it is we studied the study session before. So when we reread, the information is reprocessed and recognized, but the effects on the long-term memory are reduced. You'll recall when we thought about what it is to forget information, if we think of forgetting as a loss of access, in that situation we do have strong memory traces for the information, but because we haven't retrieved that information very often, we lose access. So with disuse, we can lose access to strong memory traces. Well, this then points to the value of retrieval practice. So when we practice retrieving information stored in our long-term memory, we are strengthening those neural pathways that have access to those memory traces. So misconception 3 then, tests only measure prior learning, and the reality is tests help consolidate the information. Tests are tools for learning. The implication is we want to use self-testing as a core study strategy, and sometimes psychologists call this retrieval practice. So we've reached the end of our lesson series here. How should we study? We have gained some insights. We've encountered 3 big misconceptions that students have and some ways around those misconceptions. To summarize then, students mistake retrieval strength for storage strength, and they stop studying. They think they know it, and they won't forget it. They think understanding in the moment is the same as remembering at a later time. And the reality is retrieval strength can be high because of the working memory boost. Number 2, students think long study sessions are valuable. The reality, when retrieval strength is already high, it is difficult to make gains in storage strength. We've got the biological plasticity limits. Number 3, testing only measures prior learning. The reality, retrieval practice helps the brain increase storage strength because you're triggering another round of consolidation. So we can think of these misconceptions as sort of a metacognitive disconnect. Metacognition is sort of your knowledge of yourself as a learner. And lots of students, we can believe that forgetting happens. We can kind of just know it does happen in the abstract, but we often behave as if it doesn't happen. Now, another way to think about this metacognitive disconnect is to consider the difference between getting information into our brain versus getting it out. Students often think that learning is about getting the information into the brain. But this overlooks the main purpose of learning, to get the information out of the brain again at a later time. And this is where retrieval practice comes in. Not only does it help us store the information because of repeated consolidations, but it helps us monitor forgetting. So let's think about Jack and Jill here, and let's say they have high retrieval strength for some bit of information, but it might be for 2 different reasons. Jack was recently studying the information for the first time, so he's got the retrieval boost, or the working memory boost going on here. So he has high retrieval strength because he's just been studying the information. Jill is not currently studying the information, but she's learned it well on repeated occasions and so has high storage strength, and this is why she has high retrieval strength. Now notice what happens then if we want to figure out which of them actually has higher storage strength. All we need to do is create a delay, so we're going to make them wait and then retest. To measure the strength of their long-term memory for the information, we must wait until Jack's working memory boost disappears. We must delay our assessment to accurately measure storage strength. And of course we know who's going to win. Jill's going to win. Her high storage strength will mean that she can retain high retrieval strength even after a delay. His low storage strength means that he's going to quickly forget the information. So tests after a delay help students more accurately calibrate metacognition. And this is another thing that students often say. They say, well, I thought I knew the stuff. I thought I knew the information. Well, that's poor metacognition then. And testing oneself is a great way to calibrate one's metacognition because you're actually assessing your long-term storage of the information. So, how do we want to study? Use retrieval practice. Use it repeatedly, spaced out in time, and that's going to maximize consolidation. Get good sleep. Sleep promotes consolidation and it prepares the brain for new learning. So if we want to transform short-term memories into long-term memories, we've got to do repeated rounds of consolidation. So sleep must be in the mix there. We've got to do repeated study sessions, and we want to use effective study sessions. We want to space them out and use a retrieval practice because that's triggering a consolidation and helps to make sure that we retain access to our long-term memory information and other deep processing strategies that we'll encounter in another lesson. And by the way, in another lesson, I will present evidence that retrieval practice is one of the best study strategies. So the goal then when we're studying in school is that we want to increase storage strength. And how do we do it? We could sort of in general say we want to create desirable difficulties. Make retrieval difficult. So we want to create conditions of low retrieval strength. Forgetting is the friend of learning. Easy way to get low retrieval strength is to create delays in your study strategy. So we can space out our study sessions. We can use retrieval practice. That's a little more difficult. Rather than rereading, we don't want to just reread information. We want to use retrieval practice. So we're forcing the brain to get access to the stored memory traces. And we want to change the context of the learning as well. So you can change study locations, mix up the study topics, and force more difficult retrieval. Remember to check forgetting after a delay. The working memory boost is not the same as long-term memory. Understanding is not the same as remembering. And be careful with long study sessions. They lose their value because synaptic plasticity may have reached its limit in one session. And in general, use other kinds of deep processing study strategies.